My name is Tracy, and at 34, I never imagined my own family would treat me like an ATM machine. Last Thanksgiving, right after I shared news of my promotion to vice president, my father slammed his fist on the table and screamed those words that changed everything. "We voted you don't have kids, so you'll pay for your sister's kids." My mother nodded in agreement while my sister Megan smirked victoriously. That's when I discovered they'd held a secret family meeting without me deciding my financial future. Before I dive into this incredible betrayal, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever dealt with family members who think they're entitled to your hard-earned money. Trust me, what happened next will shock you as much as it shocked me. Growing up, I always knew my parents played favorites, but I never imagined it would lead to this level of betrayal. As a successful marketing director who'd worked her way up from entry-level positions, I'd built my career through late nights, weekend work, and constant self-improvement. Being single at 34 wasn't a failure in my eyes. It was a choice that allowed me to focus on my goals and build the life I wanted. My sister Megan, 2 years older than me, had taken a different path. At 36, she had 3 children: 8-year-old Tyler, 6-year-old Emma, and 3-year-old Sophie. After her divorce 2 years ago, she'd refused to work, claiming that motherhood is my full-time job. Our parents never questioned this logic despite the fact that two of her kids were in school full-time. The family dynamics had always been skewed. When we were children, I was doing dishes and laundry while Megan was treated like a princess who couldn't be bothered with chores. My straight A's were met with, "Well, that's expected," while Megan's C's were celebrated with ice cream parties. When I got into a top university on scholarship, my parents said I was lucky. When Megan dropped out of community college, they said she was finding herself. My recent promotion to VP of Marketing came with a significant salary increase, something I'd worked toward for 7 years. I'd been careful with my finances, saving aggressively for early retirement, and recently purchasing an investment property. These accomplishments meant nothing to my family except as evidence that I had money to spare. The Thanksgiving dinner started normally enough. I'd arrived early to help with cooking as always, while Megan showed up 2 hours late with her kids and immediately retreated to the living room. As we sat down to eat, I shared my good news about the promotion, expecting at least a perfunctory congratulation. Instead, my father cleared his throat and announced they had something important to discuss. "Tracy," he began, his tone already setting off alarm bells in my head. "Your mother and I have been talking with Megan about her financial situation." I nodded, unsurprised. These conversations happened regularly, usually ending with my parents writing another check they couldn't afford. But what came next was beyond anything I'd imagined. "We held a family meeting 2 weeks ago." My mother chimed in, her voice carrying that false sweetness she used when trying to manipulate me. "Everyone was there except you, of course, because this concerned you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, everyone?" "Well, Megan, Aunt Helen, Uncle Robert, your cousins Brad and Lisa," my father listed as if reading roll call. "We needed to make some decisions about family responsibilities." Megan leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "We took a vote, Tracy. Since you don't have children and probably never will, the family has decided you should contribute to raising mine. It's only fair." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, certain I'd misheard. "You voted on what I should do with my money. $3,000 a month should cover it," my father stated matter-of-factly. "We calculated your new salary from your LinkedIn profile. You can afford it." The room spun as the reality hit me. My family had literally held a meeting, created spreadsheets of my income, and voted on how I should spend my money, without my knowledge, without my consent. As if my life choices and financial success were communal property to be distributed at their discretion. Jake stopped paying child support after he lost his job. Megan added, though I'd later discover this was a complete lie. "The kids need stability, and you're the only one in a position to provide it." My mother's eyes welled with practiced tears. "We sacrificed so much for you girls. This is how families work, Tracy." We help each other. But I already help, I protested, my voice rising. I set up college funds for the kids. I pay for their school supplies. I covered Tyler's dental surgery last year. That's not enough! My father's voice turned hard. This has been decided. Megan already put down a deposit on a new car based on this arrangement. The absurdity of that statement nearly made me laugh. They'd spent money they assumed I'd give them before even asking me. No, not asking, demanding. Declaring it as if I were still a child who had to obey their every command. And if I refuse? I asked, though I could already see the storm brewing in my father's eyes. Then you're not welcome in this family, he said simply. We raised you better than to be selfish. Your grandmother would be ashamed. My grandmother, who'd died 5 years ago, had always told me to stand up for myself, to never let anyone take advantage of my kind heart. Using her memory to manipulate me was a new low even for them. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. My mother's theatrical tears, my father's stern expression, Megan's entitled smirk, even the kids watching with confusion. This wasn't a family dinner, it was an ambush planned and executed with military precision. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. I need to think about this. There's nothing to think about, my father boomed. This is your duty as a member of this family. But I was already standing gathering my purse. As I headed for the door, I heard Megan stage whisper to the children, I guess Aunt Tracy doesn't love you guys after all. That night, I barely slept. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from various family members, all echoing the same theme: family helps family, don't be selfish, think of the children. Not one person asked for my side of the story. Not one person thought it strange that financial decisions about my life were made without my input. It wasn't until my cousin Lisa called the next day that I learned the full scope of their betrayal. She'd attended the meeting thinking it was about planning a surprise party for my birthday. Instead, she'd witnessed 2 hours of my family dissecting my life choices, my finances, and my future, as if I were a resource to be allocated rather than a person with my own dreams and goals. They had a PowerPoint presentation, Tracy, Lisa whispered, as if afraid someone might overhear. With graphs of your probable income trajectory and calculations of how much you could contribute over the next 18 years. It was insane. 18 years. They'd planned to use me as their personal bank for nearly 2 decades. The weight of their presumption crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't about helping family in a time of need. This was about punishment control and entitlement. I was being penalized for my success and my choice to remain childless, while Megan was being rewarded for her failures and poor decisions. As I sat in my quiet apartment looking at the life I'd built through my own efforts, I realized I had a choice to make. I could capitulate, accept their decree, and spend the rest of my life funding my sister's choices while my own dreams withered away. Or I could fight back even if it meant losing the only family I'd ever known. The decision should have been difficult. It should have torn me apart. Instead, as I blocked number after number on my phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years around my family freedom. They'd shown me who they really were, and now I had to decide who I was going to be. The full scope of my family's conspiracy became clear when I visited my childhood home 3 days after Thanksgiving. I'd hoped a calm, private conversation with my mother might help her see reason. Instead, I discovered a betrayal that ran deeper than I'd imagined. My mother greeted me at the door with her usual fake cheerfulness, as if we hadn't just had a family meeting where they'd voted to make me their financial slave. Tracy, honey, I'm so glad you came. I knew you'd come to your senses. I followed her into the kitchen, noticing immediately that something was different. The refrigerator, usually covered with my childhood achievement certificates, and photos, now displayed only Megan's children's artwork and Megan's old participation trophies from high school. Where are my awards? I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew the answer. Oh, those old things. We needed the space for current family memories, my mother said dismissively. Besides, dwelling on past achievements isn't healthy. Past achievements: my MBA graduation photo, my Employee of the Year awards, my marathon medals, all relegated to past achievements, while Megan's 15-year-old ribbon for showing up to track practice was prominently displayed. "Mom, we need to talk about this ridiculous vote." I began, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "It's not ridiculous, Tracy. We put a lot of thought into this. Brad even created a legal framework to make sure everything is fair." Cousin Brad, who just graduated from law school. I couldn't believe they had involved my 25-year-old cousin in this scheme. "He drew up a family contract," she said proudly, pulling a folder from a kitchen drawer. "All you need to do is sign, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us." I flipped through the document, my hands shaking with rage. It wasn't just about $3,000 a month. The contract gave my parents and Megan oversight of my finances, required me to submit monthly bank statements, and included a clause that any future inheritance I received would be partially allocated to Megan's children. This is insane," I said, tossing the papers on the counter. "You want me to sign away my financial autonomy to fund Megan's lifestyle?" "It's not about lifestyle." My mother's voice turned sharp. "It's about family responsibility. You've always been selfish, Tracy, always putting your career first. Well, now it's time to give back." "Give back? I've been giving since I was 16. Who paid for the new roof when I was 25? Who covered Dad's medical bills when insurance wouldn't? Who bought Megan's kids everything they needed for school every single year?" "That's different," she insisted. "Those were gifts. This is an obligation." The distinction made no sense, but I realized logic had no place in this conversation. They'd created their own reality where my success was a family resource, and my choices were subject to committee approval. "I need to see Dad," I said, hoping maybe he'd be more reasonable one-on-one. I found him in the garage organizing tools he never used. He looked up when I entered, his expression already defensive. "Before you start," he said, holding up a hand, "this decision is final. Your mother and I are united on this." "Dad, you can't possibly think this is fair. You worked your whole life for your money. Would you have wanted Grandpa to vote on how you spent it?" His face darkened. "That's different. I had a family to support. And I don't want one. That's my choice." "No." He slammed a wrench down on the workbench. "That's your selfishness. You think you're better than us with your fancy job and your investment properties. Well, let me tell you something, young lady. Without this family, you're nothing. And if you can't see fit to help your sister in her time of need, then you're no daughter of mine." The words hit like physical blows. No daughter of mine. Because I wouldn't submit to their financial extortion. Furthermore, he continued, his voice rising, "if you refuse to sign that contract, you're out of the will. Everything goes to Megan and the grandchildren who appreciate family values." I almost laughed at the irony. They wanted my money now but threatened to withhold their money later. It was all about control, punishment for daring to live life on my terms. As I turned to leave, he delivered one final blow. "Oh, and that money we borrowed from you last year for the house repairs. Consider it an advance on your family contribution. We won't be paying it back. $20,000. Gone. Just like that." I stumbled back through the house, my mind reeling. In what I thought would be my childhood bedroom, I found boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Megan's storage. My space had been erased, just like my achievements on the refrigerator. One box had tipped over, spilling its contents. There, among Megan's old clothes and junk, were my trophies and certificates, some bent, some broken, all treated like garbage. My entire childhood, my accomplishments, my identity within this family literally thrown away to make room for Megan's excess. I took photos of everything, some instinct telling me I'd need evidence of this insanity. As I was leaving, I heard voices from the living room. Megan was there with the kids, and she was coaching them. "Remember," she said in a sweet voice that made my skin crawl, "when Aunt Tracy comes out, you ask her why she doesn't love you, just like we practiced." On cue, as I passed the living room, little Sophie ran up to me. Aunt Tracy, why don't you love us anymore? Mommy says you have lots of money but won't share. I knelt down, my heart breaking. These innocent children were being used as weapons. I love you very much, Sophie. This is a grown-up problem that has nothing to do with how much I love you. Oh, liar! Megan spat from the couch. Kids, your Aunt Tracy cares more about her money than about you. That's why you might have to change schools and why Mommy can't buy you nice things. That's enough, Megan. I stood up, fury coursing through my veins. Using your children as manipulation tools is despicable. What's despicable is having all that money and refusing to help family. She shot back. Do you know how hard it is being a single mother? You're not a single mother, Jake pays child support. You just refuse to work. Her face flushed. How dare you? Raising children is work? Then get paid for it by getting a job like everyone else. Girls, please. My mother appeared in the doorway. Tracy, stop upsetting your sister. She's fragile. Fragile. Megan had been fragile our entire lives. Fragile when she needed to do chores. Fragile when she failed classes. Fragile when she maxed out credit cards. Fragile when she cheated on Jake and caused their divorce. Always fragile, never responsible. I left that house knowing I was walking away from more than just a building. Every step felt like a goodbye to the family I thought I had, the family that existed, only in my desperate hope that somewhere beneath the dysfunction, there was love. That evening, my phone rang constantly. Aunt Helen called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle Robert texted that family comes first. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about my selfishness. The most illuminating call came from Father Michael, our family priest. Tracy, your parents asked me to speak with you about your duties as a Christian daughter. Father, did they tell you they held a secret meeting to vote on confiscating my income? He paused. They said you were refusing to help with the children. I've been helping for years. They want me to sign a contract giving them control over my finances. Another pause, longer this time. Perhaps you could see this as an opportunity to practice Christian charity. Even the priest was in on it. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. My best friend Emma came over that night with wine and tissues. This is insane, she said after I'd recounted everything. You know, this is just the beginning, right? If you give in now, they'll only demand more. She was right. If I signed that contract, I'd be signing away not just my money, but my autonomy, my future, my right to make my own choices. The family that claimed to love me was willing to destroy me for their own benefit. As we talked late into the night, I began to see the pattern I'd been blind to for years. Every success I achieved was minimized. Every boundary I set was criticized. Every choice I made that didn't benefit Megan was selfish. I wasn't a family member. I was a resource to be exploited. The next morning, I woke to find 57 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The family phone tree had been activated. Relatives I'd never met were weighing in on my character. The word selfish appeared in nearly every message. But one message stood out from a number I didn't recognize. It was my Aunt Patricia, my father's estranged sister, who I'd been told was crazy and forbidden from contacting. Tracy, I heard what they're doing to you. The same thing happened to me 30 years ago. Call me if you want to know the truth about our family. Be strong. Patricia. I stared at that message for a long time. Somewhere out there was someone who understood someone who'd faced this same battle. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I was just the latest in a line of family members who dared to succeed on their own terms. That afternoon, Megan sent a group text to the entire family with a photo of her children looking sad. Kids who might lose their home because their aunt cares more about money than family. The responses were immediate and vicious. I was called heartless, selfish, materialistic, and worse. Not one person asked why a healthy 36-year-old woman couldn't work to support her own children. Not one person questioned why my money was considered family property. I turned off my phone and made a decision. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. But I wouldn't fight on their terms. I'd fight smart with documentation, legal protection, and the truth. That evening, I called a family law attorney. It was time to protect myself from the people who were supposed to love me most. The full-scale assault on my life began the Monday after I refused to sign their contract. I arrived at work to find Megan in the lobby with all 3 children, creating a scene that would haunt my professional reputation for months to come. "There she is!" Megan shrieked as I walked through the revolving doors. "There's your Aunt Tracy who wants you to be homeless." The children, clearly coached, began crying on cue. Sophie clung to her mother's leg while Tyler and Emma held signs that read, "Why don't you love us, Aunt Tracy?" The morning rush of employees stopped to stare, whispers rippling through the crowd. "Megan, this is my workplace," I hissed, trying to guide her toward the exit. "You need to leave." "Not until you agree to help your family," she declared loudly. "Everyone should know what kind of person you are, Tracy Morrison. You make 6 figures while your nieces and nephews suffer." Security arrived quickly, but the damage was done. My colleagues watched as guards escorted my sister and her crying children from the building. I felt hundreds of eyes on me as I walked to the elevator, my face burning with humiliation. My boss, Carl, called me into his office within minutes. "Tracy, what just happened down there?" I explained the situation as professionally as possible. "But how do you tell your boss that your family is trying to extort money from you?" Carl listened with growing concern. "This can't affect our workplace," he said finally. "I sympathize with your situation, but if this continues, we'll need to discuss alternative arrangements." Alternative arrangements. Corporate speak for, "You might lose your job." The rest of the day was torture. Whispers followed me everywhere. The colleague who'd been competing for my promotion, Janet, made sure to loudly discuss family values during our team meeting. By lunch, the entire office knew some version of the story, most of them painting me as a heartless aunt refusing to help orphaned children. That evening, I discovered the morning's incident was just the opening salvo. My parents had called my company's main line, repeatedly reaching the CEO's assistant. They claimed I was mentally unstable and suggested the company investigate my fitness for the VP position. "They said you've been acting erratically," Carl informed me during an emergency meeting. "They expressed concern about you handling significant company resources." My own parents were trying to destroy my career because I wouldn't submit to their financial demands. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. "Carl, I need you to understand something," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "My family is attempting to extort money from me. They held a meeting where they voted to confiscate $3,000 a month from my salary. When I refused, they launched this campaign to destroy my life." He looked skeptical, and why wouldn't he? It sounded insane because it was insane. Meanwhile, Megan had taken to social media with a vengeance. She posted the photos from the lobby on Facebook, tagging my company, and writing a heart-wrenching post about her executive sister who abandoned family for money. The post went viral in our community, shared hundreds of times in local mom groups. The comments were brutal. Strangers called me a monster, a corporate witch, a child-free, bitter woman jealous of her sister's beautiful family. Someone found my LinkedIn and posted screenshots of my salary range. My professional headshot was turned into memes about heartless career women. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. High school classmates, distant relatives, even my dental hygienist weighed in on my character. The court of public opinion had tried and convicted me based on Megan's carefully crafted narrative. Then came Pastor David's call. "Tracy, I think we need to have a counseling session about your struggles with greed and family responsibility." Pastor, did my parents mention they tried to force me to sign a contract giving them control over my finances? "Money isn't everything, Tracy. The Bible says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven." "I'm not rich, I'm comfortable. And I worked for every penny." "Pride goeth before a fall," he intoned solemnly. "I'll be praying for your heart to soften." Even my spiritual community had turned against me. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of judgment and manipulation. The next blow came from my bank. While reviewing my accounts to ensure my family couldn't access them, I discovered a credit card in my name with a $15,000 balance. The purchases stretched back 2 years: designer clothes, restaurant bills, spa treatments, all in Megan's city. My parents had stolen my identity to fund Megan's lifestyle. I filed a fraud report immediately, but that meant accusing my own parents of identity theft. The bank investigator warned me that pressing charges against family members could get complicated. Ha! Complicated. I laughed bitterly. They've already disowned me for not giving them money. What's left to lose? That's when Jake, Megan's ex-husband, called. Tracy, I need to tell you something. I saw what Megan posted online and it's all lies. We met at a coffee shop the next day. Jake looked tired but determined. I pay $1,500 in child support every month, never missed a payment, he said, sliding bank statements across the table. Plus, I cover their health insurance and split all expenses. Megan tells everyone I abandoned them, but I have them every other week. Why didn't you say anything sooner? He grimaced. Have you met your family? They threatened to make false abuse allegations if I contradicted their narrative, but seeing what they're doing to you, I can't stay silent. Jake revealed more. Megan received government assistance by lying about his support, worked cash jobs under the table while claiming to be unemployed, and used the children as props in various online fundraising scams. Your parents know everything, he added. They help her hide assets and coach her on what to say to social services. My family wasn't just dysfunctional, they were criminals. That weekend was our extended family reunion, which I'd initially planned to skip. But Aunt Patricia's message kept echoing in my mind. I decided to go armed with evidence and recording apps on my phone. The reunion was held at Uncle Robert's house, a sprawling property that suddenly made me wonder how a retired postal worker afforded it. I arrived to find cars lining the street and knew immediately this wasn't a normal gathering. Inside, 50 relatives formed a semicircle in the living room. At the center sat my parents and Megan, looking like victims at a support group. Grandmother's sister Martha, the family matriarch at 91, held court in a throne-like chair. Tracy! Martha's voice crackled with authority. Come here, child. I approached, feeling like a defendant approaching the bench. Your family has told me disturbing things about your selfishness, she continued. In my day, family took care of family, period. I agree, I said calmly, which is why I've been helping Megan for years. But there's a difference between helping and enabling. Don't talk back, my father roared. Show respect. Cousin Brad stepped forward with a new version of the contract. We've modified the terms to be more reasonable. Only $2,500 a month, and you maintain some autonomy over your investments. How generous, I said dryly. You've decided to steal slightly less of my money. The room erupted in angry voices. Accusations flew. I was materialistic, selfish, probably a lesbian, because why else would I be 34 and single, definitely going to hell, and bringing shame upon our family name? Through it all, I recorded everything on my phone, tucked safely in my pocket. Then, Megan stood up, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want to share this, she said dramatically, but Tracy threatened my children. She said she'd report me to CPS and have them taken away. The lie was so outrageous I actually laughed, which was the wrong response. The room exploded again, this time with genuine fury. Uncle Tony lunged toward me, stopped only by Brad's intervention. Get out! Multiple voices screamed. You're no longer family. As I left, I heard them taking another vote. This time, they voted to formally shun me until I came to my senses and signed the contract. Anyone who contacted me would face the same punishment. The shunning might have been a relief if they'd actually followed through. Instead, the harassment intensified. Megan filed a false CPS report claiming I'd threatened the children. I had to hire a lawyer, Diane Martinez, to defend myself against the investigation. This is escalating beyond family drama, Diane warned. Your sister could face charges for false reporting. Good, I said, exhausted beyond measure. Maybe consequences will stop this insanity. But Megan was already 2 steps ahead. She'd started a GoFundMe called Help a Single Mom Betrayed by Family, complete with photos of her children in their oldest clothes, and a narrative painting me as a wealthy executive who'd abandoned my family values for corporate greed. The fundraiser had already collected $5,000. My employer received anonymous complaints about my moral character. Someone sent emails from a spoofed address that looked like mine containing inappropriate content to colleagues. My professional reputation built over 14 years crumbled in weeks. Carl called me in again. Tracy, I believe you're the victim here, but the board is concerned about the disruption. I'm going to suggest you take a leave of absence until this resolves. A leave of absence. My career, the one thing I'd built independent of my toxic family, was now collateral damage in their war against me. I spent that night on my bathroom floor sobbing until I had no tears left. My health was deteriorating from the stress. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and had developed chronic anxiety that made my chest feel constantly tight. Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, found me the next morning when I didn't answer her knock. She made me tea and listened to the whole story without judgment. I escaped similar situation in China, she said quietly. Family wanted to control my life because I was a successful woman with no children. I left everything, came here with nothing. Best decision I ever made. But they're my family, I whispered. No, she said firmly. Family loves you for who you are, not what you can give them. These people, they are not family. They are parasites. Her words sparked something in me. I'd been fighting to preserve relationships with people who saw me as nothing more than a bank account. Why? That evening, I made a list of everything they'd done: the identity theft, the false CPS report, the workplace harassment, the social media defamation, the attempted fraud with government services. It wasn't just family dysfunction anymore. It was a criminal conspiracy to destroy my life because I wouldn't comply with their extortion. I called Diane. I want to pursue every legal option available: criminal charges, restraining orders, defamation suits, everything. Are you prepared for what that means? She asked. This will likely destroy any chance of reconciliation. I thought about the family photos in my apartment, the memories of holidays and birthdays, the moments when I'd fooled myself into believing we had real love between us. Then I thought about the campaign of destruction they'd launched because I dared to say no to their demands. There's nothing left to reconcile, I said. They've shown me who they are. Now I need to show them who I am. The war was far from over, but for the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt like I was fighting back instead of just absorbing blows. They'd wanted to break me, to force me into submission through destruction of everything I'd built. They were about to learn that Tracy Morrison didn't break that easily. The extended family's intervention at the reunion had been just a preview. 3 weeks later, they orchestrated something far more sinister at my grandmother's memorial service, turning sacred ground into a battlefield. I'd debated attending the 5-year memorial service knowing it would be hostile territory. But Grandmother Margaret had been the only family member who'd truly seen me, and I couldn't let them take that away too. I arrived early, hoping to pay my respects in peace. The church was already packed with family members who'd traveled from 3 states. As I entered, conversation stopped. 50 pairs of eyes tracked my movement to a back pew. The judgment was palpable, pressing against me like a physical force. Aunt Martha, the family matriarch, had orchestrated everything. She'd even printed programs that included a special insert about family unity and honoring Margaret's legacy through sacrifice. It didn't take a genius to decode the message. Father Michael began the service with pointed remarks about charity and family obligation. Every scripture reading seemed chosen specifically to condemn me. When he spoke about the Good Samaritan, he made eye contact with me while emphasizing those who pass by suffering without helping. Then came the ambush. During the open remembrance portion, instead of sharing memories of grandmother, my family staged a coordinated attack. Megan stood first, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. Grandmother Margaret always said family comes first, she began. She'd be heartbroken to know that some family members have forgotten this lesson, choosing money over blood. One by one, relatives stood to share similar sentiments, not memories of grandmother, but thinly veiled attacks on my character. They painted a picture of a selfish granddaughter who'd abandoned family values for corporate success. When Cousin Brad stood, he didn't even pretend to talk about grandmother. He pulled out a document and began reading what sounded like a legal brief about family obligations and moral duties. That's when I realized the true purpose of this gathering. Therefore, Brad concluded, we, the unified family of Margaret Morrison, hereby present Tracy Morrison with this family contract, witnessed by all assembled, requiring her to fulfill her obligations as determined by family vote. They expected me to sign a legal document at my grandmother's memorial service. The audacity was breathtaking. This is sacred ground, I said, standing slowly. How dare you turn grandmother's memorial into this circus? How dare you abandon your family? My father shot back. Sign the contract, Tracy. Honor your grandmother's memory. I looked around the church at these people who shared my blood, but nothing else. They'd weaponized even grief, turned remembrance into manipulation. Grandmother told me something before she died, I said, my voice carrying through the sanctuary. She said, Tracy, never let them break you. You're stronger than the rest of them combined. She knew what you were. All of you. The eruption was immediate. Accusations flew like missiles. But I was already walking out, my phone recording everything. Behind me, I heard Brad declaring they'd vote to pursue other options if I didn't comply. Those other options revealed themselves within days. First came the financial attacks. My parents, using information from their theft of my identity, had been calling my creditors, claiming to be me, trying to access my accounts. When that failed, they began filing false claims. Megan submitted a civil suit claiming I'd promised to support her children and then reneged, causing emotional and financial damage. The lawsuit sought $50,000 in damages plus ongoing support. It was completely fabricated, but I still had to hire Diane to defend against it. Then came the discovery that made my blood run cold. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, overheard Megan talking on the phone in our building's lobby, planning something that sounded like kidnapping. She said Tracy is mentally unstable, Mrs. Chen reported. Said family might need to intervene for her own safety. Mentioned a facility. They were planning to have me involuntarily committed. I called Diane immediately. Can they do that? If they get enough family members to claim you're a danger to yourself or others, they could try, she said grimly. We need to get ahead of this. Dr. Sarah Williams, my therapist, became my lifeline. She documented my mental health status, prepared letters attesting to my stability, and warned me about the tactics toxic families use against members who refuse to comply. This is financial abuse escalating to attempted false imprisonment, she explained. Your family is showing classic patterns of narcissistic abuse dynamics. One member is scapegoated for the dysfunction of the entire system. The scapegoat. It fit perfectly. Every family failure, every financial struggle, every unhappy moment could be traced back to my selfishness in their narrative. My success wasn't celebrated, it was resented and targeted for redistribution. Jake reached out again with more disturbing information. Megan's been coaching the kids to lie about you. She's telling them you're dangerous, that you want to hurt them. Tyler asked me if it's true that you tried to poison them at Thanksgiving. Poisoning children. The accusations kept escalating, each more outrageous than the last. But I was learning that outrageous lies, repeated often enough, begin to sound plausible to those who want to believe them. The social media campaign intensified. Megan had connected with influencers in the mommy blogging sphere who specialized in family drama content. My story, twisted beyond recognition, became fodder for think pieces about toxic child-free women and when family members abandon their obligations. One blogger with 2 million followers posted a video essay about me using photos stolen from my social media. She analyzed my cold expression and materialistic lifestyle, diagnosing me with various personality disorders based on Megan's lies. The video got 5 million views. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, all convinced they knew exactly who I was and what I deserved. My LinkedIn was bombarded with messages calling me a sociopath. Strangers found my work email and sent death threats. Someone posted my address online, and I started receiving packages with baby clothes covered in fake blood and notes saying, "For the children you're killing." Carl called me into another meeting. "Tracy, someone sent the board screenshots of that viral video. They're questioning whether you align with company values." Company values. I couldn't hide my bitterness. I've given this company 14 years of exceptional work. One viral lie, and that's all forgotten. "I'm fighting for you," he said quietly. "But you need to resolve this. The board doesn't care about the truth. They care about perception." Perception. My family had successfully painted me as a monster in the court of public opinion, and truth was irrelevant compared to viral narratives. Then Aunt Patricia finally responded to my attempts to contact her. We met at a small cafe 2 hours from town, both of us checking constantly for familiar faces. Patricia looked like an older version of me, with the same determined jaw and wary eyes. "I've been watching your situation unfold," she said without preamble. "It's exactly what they did to me 30 years ago." She told me her story: successful businesswoman, child-free by choice, targeted by family for financial exploitation. When she refused, they'd destroyed her reputation. Her career even tried to have her committed. She'd lost everything and had to rebuild in another state. "But there's more," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "I've been documenting the family patterns for decades. Look." The papers revealed a horrifying truth. This wasn't the first time. Uncle Frank, 20 years ago, bankrupted after being forced to fund family members' lifestyles. Cousin Jennifer, who'd fled to Australia after similar treatment. Great Aunt Rose, who'd died alone in a nursing home after the family drained her savings. "It's generational," Patricia explained. "They pick the most successful family member, usually someone without children or who makes unconventional choices, and parasitically drain them. When that person is destroyed, they move to the next target." "Why didn't anyone warn me?" She smiled sadly. "Would you have believed it? And anyone who speaks up gets the same treatment. I tried to warn Jennifer, but your parents had already convinced her I was crazy and bitter." The pattern was clear. I wasn't special. I was just the current host for the family parasite. And if I fell, they'd move on to whoever succeeded next, probably my younger cousin Alex, who just started a promising tech career. "What do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of the conspiracy. "Document everything. Fight legally. And most importantly, don't give in. Not $1. Because the moment you do, you've accepted your role as the family bank and they'll never stop." She gave me contact information for lawyers, therapists, and support groups that specialized in financial abuse by family members. "You're not alone," she said as we parted. "There are more of us than you think. Successful people destroyed by entitled families who believe achievement is communal property." That night, Megan escalated again. She filed a report claiming I'd been embezzling from my company to avoid helping family. The accusation was baseless, but triggered a formal investigation at work. I was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. My income stopped. My reputation was destroyed. My career hung by a thread. And still they pushed for more. The family group chat that excluded me was accidentally forwarded by Lisa, who'd grown uncomfortable with the escalation. The messages revealed their next steps: hiring a private investigator to find dirt on me, reaching out to any romantic partners from my past for character witnesses, and exploring whether they could challenge my power of attorney documents to gain control of my assets if I was deemed incompetent. One message from my mother chilled me. "If she won't help willingly, we'll make sure she has no choice." The family needs those resources, and Tracy's selfishness won't stop us from getting them. Resources, not money earned through my education sacrifice and hard work. Resources, like I was a mine to be extracted rather than a person to be loved. That's when I realized this would never end unless I ended it. They wouldn't stop at financial destruction. They'd already shown willingness to destroy my mental health, my freedom, even my basic safety. The only question was how far I was willing to go to protect myself. I made my decision. If they wanted to play scorched earth, I'd show them what that really meant. But first, I needed to gather my own ammunition. Because while they'd been attacking, I'd been documenting. And what I'd discovered about my family's financial crimes would change everything. The 63rd day of my unpaid administrative leave nearly broke me. I sat in my attorney's office staring at an eviction notice. Without income and with legal fees mounting, I'd burned through my emergency fund faster than imagined. The investment property I'd worked so hard to acquire was now my only shelter. They've systematically destroyed my life. I told Diane, my voice hollow from exhaustion. Maybe I should just give them what they want. Diane slammed her hand on the desk. That's exactly what they're counting on. Tracy, we're close to exposing their entire operation. Don't give up now. But sitting in my empty apartment, having sold furniture to pay legal bills, I wondered if principles were worth homelessness. My family had calculated perfectly, pushing me to the brink of ruin where capitulation seemed the only option. Then Megan made her final near-fatal move. She appeared at my apartment with 2 police officers, tears streaming down her face. My sister assaulted me yesterday. She sobbed, showing bruises on her arms. I'm terrified for my safety and my children's. I stared in shock as officers asked me to step outside. I haven't seen Megan in 2 weeks, I protested. I was at my lawyer's office all day yesterday. This is false. But Megan had filed a report complete with photos of injuries and a witness statement from our mother swearing she'd seen me attack Megan. I was handcuffed in my own doorway, my neighbors watching as I was led away. The next 6 hours were the darkest of my life. Sitting in a holding cell, I realized my family wasn't just trying to extort money anymore. They wanted me destroyed, completely removed from society so they could access my assets without interference. Diane arrived with security footage from my building and sworn affidavits from 3 witnesses placing me across town during the alleged assault. The footage showed Megan arriving at my building alone, going into the stairwell, and emerging minutes later with the injuries she'd inflicted on herself. She hurt herself to frame me, I said, numb with disbelief. My own sister deliberately injured herself to have me arrested. The charges were dropped, but the arrest record existed. Another mark against my character, another piece of evidence that I was unstable and dangerous. But something shifted in that holding cell. The desperation transformed into cold, calculated fury. They'd pushed too far. Emma had been secretly recording our family for weeks after I'd confided in her. She'd attended family gatherings, pretending to sympathize with their cause while gathering evidence. That night, she arrived at my apartment with a flash drive. "You need to see this," she said. The recordings were damning. My parents discussing their fraud schemes, Megan bragging about her welfare fraud, Brad explaining how to hide assets from government agencies. But the most shocking revelation was about the house. "We'll mortgage it again," my father's voice said clearly. "Tracy doesn't know we forged her signature on the original loan. If she finds out, we blame it on identity confusion." They'd used my credit to secure a second mortgage on their house 3 years ago. $150,000 borrowed in my name without my knowledge. The payments had been made from accounts they'd opened using my information funded by cash deposits to avoid detection. "This is it," Diane said when I showed her the recordings. "This is organized crime. RICO statutes could apply here." While we prepared our counteroffensive, Jake revealed another piece of the puzzle. He'd hired his own investigator when Megan started claiming poverty in court. "She has $40,000 in cash hidden in a safety deposit box," he reported. "Plus, she's been collecting disability benefits for a fake back injury while working under the table as a consultant. I have photos of her at the gym doing CrossFit the same week she claimed to be bedridden. The investigation also revealed my parents' hidden assets: two rental properties in another state, a boat registered under my uncle's name but paid for by them, and investment accounts totaling over $200,000, all while they cried poverty and demanded my support. But the most valuable evidence came from an unexpected source. Lisa, my cousin, who'd attended the original family meeting, had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with the escalation. When she learned about Megan's false assault claim, she reached her breaking point. "I've been recording family meetings for months," she confessed when we met secretly. "What they're doing to you is wrong, and it's criminal. I want to testify." Her recordings included the original vote meeting where they'd planned my financial subjugation, Brad presenting his legal framework that was essentially extortion, my parents admitting they'd stolen my identity, Megan laughing about manipulating her children to guilt me, the entire family discussing how to destroy my career and reputation if I didn't comply. One recording stood out. Martha, the family matriarch, revealing the systematic nature of their scheme. "We did this with Patricia, with Frank, with Rose. The family survives by redistributing wealth from the selfish to the deserving. Tracy's just the latest, and she won't be the last." It was a confession to decades of financial abuse recorded in clear audio. Armed with this evidence, we went on the offensive. Diane filed reports with the IRS, FBI, State Welfare Fraud Division, and local authorities. The amount of documented fraud exceeded $500,000 across multiple victims over 20 years. The family's response was predictable, but desperate. They called an emergency meeting where they voted to have me involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Williams was ready with documentation, but they'd found a distant relative who was a psychiatrist willing to sign commitment papers based on their lies. The confrontation came at 6 a.m. when two mental health professionals arrived with my parents to execute an emergency psychiatric hold. But we'd anticipated this. Diane was already there with a restraining order and cease and desist letters. "This is harassment and false imprisonment," she announced. "Leave immediately or face arrest." My mother's mask finally slipped completely. "You ungrateful bitch," she screamed. "We gave you everything you owe us. You gave me trauma and theft." I responded calmly, "And now you'll face consequences." The investigation moved quickly after that. Federal agents interviewed family members, forensic accountants traced the fraud network, and prosecutors built cases for multiple felonies. The family's house of cards began collapsing. Megan was arrested first for welfare fraud. The image of her being led away in handcuffs while live streaming about her innocence became viral for different reasons than she'd hoped. Her children were placed with Jake full-time pending investigation. My parents were charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and tax evasion. The discovery that they'd defrauded not just me but government programs and charities for decades meant serious federal charges. Their assets were frozen, including the house they'd mortgaged in my name. Brad faced disbarment proceedings for his role in creating fraudulent legal documents. Other family members were investigated for their participation in the conspiracy. The family that had stood united in destroying me now turned on each other, each trying to minimize their own culpability. Through it all, I'd found an unexpected support network. Patricia introduced me to others who'd survived similar family exploitation. There were dozens of us successful individuals whose families had tried to destroy them for refusing to be financial slaves. Dr. Williams helped me understand the psychology. Dysfunctional families often select one member as the repository for all their failures and resentments. Your success didn't cause their problems, but it gave them a target for their anger. This was never about money. It was about power, control, and punishment for daring to transcend the family dysfunction. My employer, seeing the evidence of harassment and false accusations, not only reinstated me, but promoted me to senior vice president. Carl personally apologized for doubting me and implemented new policies protecting employees from harassment campaigns. "You handled this crisis with more grace than anyone could expect," he said. "That's exactly the leadership we need." The viral narrative began shifting as truth emerged. The mommy blogger who'd made the video about me posted a retraction and apology after being threatened with a defamation suit. Local news covered the family fraud ring, and suddenly I wasn't the villain anymore. But the sweetest vindication came from an unexpected source. During Megan's trial, she broke down and admitted everything: the manipulation, the lies, the deliberate campaign to destroy me. She revealed that our parents had been coaching her since childhood to see me as the enemy, the person whose success stole from her potential. They told me Tracy's achievements were why I failed. She sobbed to the judge. That if she hadn't taken all the opportunities, I would have succeeded. I believed them. I taught my children to hate her because I was taught to hate her. It was tragic and infuriating. A lifetime of sisterhood destroyed by parents who couldn't bear to see one child succeed without viewing it as theft from the other. They'd created the very dynamic they claimed to abhor, ensuring one daughter's success meant the other's failure. As the legal proceedings continued, I made a decision. The lawyer handling the estate issues presented options for recovering the stolen funds, prosecuting every participant, and ensuring maximum penalties. I could destroy them all as thoroughly as they'd tried to destroy me. Instead, I chose strategic mercy. Full prosecution for my parents and Megan, who'd led the criminal conspiracy. Immunity for relatives like Lisa, who testified truthfully. Restitution requirements, but no jail time for those who'd been manipulated into participating but hadn't committed actual crimes. Why, Diane asked. After everything they did? Because I'm not them, I said simply. I won't perpetuate the cycle of destruction, but I also won't enable it. They'll face consequences, but I won't become the monster they painted me as. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Given the power to destroy, I chose justice over revenge. The family that had accused me of being heartless watched as I showed more mercy than they'd ever offered me. But mercy didn't mean reconciliation. As I prepared to move forward, I knew these relationships were dead. You can't rebuild trust after someone tries to destroy your life for money. You can't pretend family bonds exist when those bonds were conditional on your submission to exploitation. The breaking point had passed. I'd survived. Now came the harder part, learning to live with the scars while building something better from the ashes of what they'd burned. The full scope of my family's criminal enterprise unraveled like a cheap sweater once federal investigators pulled the first thread. What started as investigation into welfare fraud exploded into a multi-state, multi-decade pattern of sophisticated financial crimes that shocked even seasoned FBI agents. Agent Diana Foster, leading the investigation, called me in for what would become a 12-hour session of revelations. Ms. Morrison, your family isn't just dysfunctional. They're a criminal organization that's been operating for over 30 years. The evidence room looked like something from a mob investigation. Boxes of documents, charts showing money flow, photographs of assets hidden under false names. At the center, a board showing my grandmother's estate. Your grandmother died with assets worth $2 million, Agent Foster explained. Your parents told you she died with nothing, correct? I nodded, remembering how they'd claimed grandmother's medical bills had drained everything. They systematically stole it. Forged documents, created false debts, transferred properties. Your Aunt Patricia was right to run. She was next on their list before you came of age. The investigation revealed layers of fraud I couldn't have imagined. My parents had claimed me as a dependent on taxes for years after I'd moved out collecting credits and deductions. They'd opened credit lines using my information dating back to when I turned 18. The identity theft Megan committed was just the latest in a pattern established by our parents. But the most shocking revelation came from forensic accounting of Megan's finances. While claiming poverty and collecting every possible benefit she'd accumulated over $300,000 in hidden assets. Cryptocurrency accounts, cash deposits structured to avoid reporting requirements. Luxury goods purchased under aliases and stored in rented spaces. Your sister learned from your parents, Agent Foster noted, but she got sloppy. The welfare fraud was stupid. The assault frame-up was desperate. That's what broke this open. Jake's testimony proved crucial. He'd documented everything during their divorce, suspecting he'd need protection from false accusations. His records showed Megan had hidden assets even from divorce court, committing perjury to get larger settlements. She told the kids I was dead to them, Jake revealed in his deposition. Said if they mentioned me to social services, they'd be taken away forever. My own children were terrified to say my name. The investigation expanded when they discovered my family wasn't operating alone. There was a network of similar families across 3 states, all connected through Martha the matriarch. They shared tactics, legal strategies, and even targets. It was generational organized crime hiding behind the facade of family values. During this time, I lived under protection. Death threats had escalated after the arrests, some from family members, others from strangers who still believed Megan's narrative. Moving between safe houses while running a major corporate division wasn't easy, but I refused to let them steal my career along with everything else. The turning point came when Lisa wore a wire to a family emergency meeting. What she recorded became the prosecution's key evidence. "We should have killed her," my Uncle Tony said clearly. "Made it look like suicide. Depressed career woman, no family support. No one would have questioned it." "We still could," my mother's voice responded. "If she dies before trial, this all goes away." They spent 2 hours discussing methods to murder me while making it appear self-inflicted. My mother, the woman who'd given birth to me, calmly debated whether pills or hanging would be more believable given my mental health issues they'd fabricated. That recording ended any possibility of plea deals. Conspiracy to commit murder elevated everything to a different level. RICO charges were filed. The family that had accused me of destroying them now faced decades in federal prison. As trial dates approached, the rats began abandoning ship. Cousin Brad, facing disbarment and prison, flipped completely. His testimony revealed the deeper structure of their organization. "There's a handbook," he testified. "Literally a written guide passed down through generations on how to identify, isolate, and drain successful family members. They call it the redistribution." The handbook was recovered from Martha's house. A 70-page document detailing psychological manipulation tactics, legal strategies to avoid prosecution, and methods for destroying resistant targets. My section was bookmarked with notes in my mother's handwriting about my vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. One entry chilled me. "Tracy shows excessive empathy. Use the children. She'll break when she believes she's hurting innocents." They'd studied me like scientists studying a lab rat, documenting every weakness to use against me. The media attention exploded when the handbook went public. The Family That Prays Together became a documentary series. My story transformed from a family dispute to a cautionary tale about generational financial abuse. Suddenly, everyone had opinions about toxic families and financial boundaries. But the personal revelations hit harder than public vindication. During discovery, I found letters between my parents from before I was born. They'd planned my role from conception. "If it's a girl, we'll push her toward career success," my mother had written. "Boys are harder to control, but girls can be guilted into providing. We'll make sure she stays single and focused on achievement. Megan will be the family one. Tracy will be the provider." They'd assigned our roles before we could walk. Megan never had a chance to succeed because they needed her dependent. I never had a chance at family because they needed me isolated and achieving. We weren't daughters. We were components in their financial ecosystem. This revelation broke something in Megan during her trial. Her lawyer had to request multiple recesses as she processed the reality that our parents had engineered her failures as deliberately as they'd pushed my successes. They sabotaged my college applications. She testified through tears. Told me I wasn't smart enough while telling everyone else I was lazy. Made sure I got pregnant young by interfering with my birth control. Said raising children was my calling while using my dependency to guilt Tracy. It was heartbreaking testimony. My sister, who I'd grown to hate, was as much a victim as I was, just a different kind. They'd created us both as tools, her as the perpetual victim to generate guilt, me as the achiever to generate income. Neither of us had been loved for who we were, only valued for our utility in their scheme. The trials proceeded swiftly. My parents were convicted on all counts: racketeering, wire fraud, tax evasion, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder. They received 25 years each, effectively life sentences given their ages. Megan got 5 years for welfare fraud and false reporting, with possibility of early release conditional on restitution and therapy. The judge recognized she was both perpetrator and victim, showing more mercy than I'd initially wanted him to. Martha died during the trial, taking her secrets about the network's origins to the grave. Other family members received various sentences based on their involvement. The family reunion that had once terrorized me scattered to minimum security facilities across the federal system. Throughout the trials, I maintained dignified silence publicly while being fully transparent with authorities. Each court appearance meant facing people who'd claimed to love me while planning my destruction. Some showed remorse, others only rage that their scheme had failed. The financial recovery was complex. Properties bought with stolen funds were seized, hidden accounts frozen, restitution ordered but unlikely to ever be fully paid. I recovered perhaps 40% of what they'd stolen over the years, not counting the emotional and professional damage. But something unexpected happened during asset recovery. We discovered trust funds my grandmother had tried to create for her grandchildren before her death, hidden by my parents, but not yet drained. The one designated for me contained a letter. "My dear Tracy." It read in grandmother's shaky handwriting. "I know what they are. I've watched them destroy Frank and Patricia and others. I tried to stop it, but am too old and weak now. This money is hidden where they cannot find it. Use it to escape when the time comes. You are the strongest of us all. Break the cycle. I love you for who you are, not what you can provide. Never forget that. Love, Grandmother Margaret." She'd known. She'd tried to protect me, and even in death she'd given me the validation that none of the living family ever had. With the criminal trials ending, civil suits began. Jake sued Megan for custody and damages. I sued for defamation, identity theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Corporate lawyers sued those who'd tried to destroy my career. The legal avalanche buried the family's reputation entirely. But my greatest victory came from an unexpected source. Other victims of family financial abuse began reaching out. My story had given them courage to confront their own situations. Support groups formed. Legal resources were shared. A movement grew from the ashes of my family's destruction. I started a foundation with the recovered funds, Breaking the Cycle. It provides legal assistance, safe housing, and counseling for people escaping financial abuse by family members. The first year, we helped over 200 people escape similar situations. Patricia joined the board, bringing decades of experience and wisdom. "You did what I couldn't," she told me at our first meeting. "You didn't just escape. You exposed them. You saved future victims." During this time, I also built real relationships for the first time. Without the constant manipulation and guilt, I discovered I could trust people. My friend Emma, who'd risked everything to help me, became the sister I'd never had. My boss Carl became a mentor who showed me professional success didn't require sacrificing humanity. I even began dating Marcus, a fellow survivor of family financial abuse I met through support groups. He understood the complexity of grieving people who were still alive, of loving the family you wished you'd had, while protecting yourself from the family you actually had. The documentary aired 2 years after the arrests. I participated reluctantly, wanting the story told accurately rather than sensationalized. Watching my life play out on screen was surreal, but the response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from people saying, "This is my family too," or "I thought I was alone." Megan watched it from prison and sent her first genuine letter. "I see it now. All of it. We were both victims, just in different ways. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally understand. I visited her once before her release. We sat across a metal table, two strangers who'd shared a childhood but never a real relationship. She looked older, harder, but also clearer than I'd ever seen her. I'm getting help, she said simply. Real help. The kids are doing better with Jake. Maybe someday when we're both healed we can start over. Not as the people they made us be, but as who we really are. Maybe. I agreed, meaning it. But not yet. Maybe not ever. And that has to be okay. She nodded, understanding. We'd both learned that love without boundaries was just another word for exploitation. If we ever built a relationship, it would be on entirely different terms. As I left the prison, I realized the revelation phase was ending. The counterattack had succeeded beyond my wildest hopes. The criminal enterprise was destroyed. Victims were getting justice, and truth had replaced lies in the public narrative. But victory felt hollow in some ways. I'd won a war I'd never wanted to fight against an enemy that should have been family. The cost of winning was losing any chance of ever having the loving family I'd always craved. Yet as I drove home to my new life surrounded by chosen family and doing work that mattered, I realized something important. They'd tried to destroy me for refusing to be their victim. Instead, their attacks had forged me into someone stronger, someone who could help others escape similar hells. They'd created their own destroyer. The irony was perfect, even if the price had been everything. 2 years after the trials ended, I stood before an audience of 200 survivors at the Breaking the Cycle annual conference. The woman looking back at me from the hotel mirror bore little resemblance to the person who'd sat at that Thanksgiving table, blindsided by family betrayal. My name is Tracy Morrison. I began my keynote speech and I survived my family. The applause was understanding, not celebration. Everyone in that room knew the weight of those words, the grief hidden within survival. We'd all paid the price of refusing to be victims, and that price was the families we desperately wanted to love us. My life had transformed completely. The executive position I'd nearly lost became a platform for advocating corporate policies protecting employees from harassment. My company now led the industry in supporting workers facing domestic abuse, including financial abuse by family members. Marcus and I had bought a house in a different state, far from the memories. Not running away, but choosing where to plant new roots. He understood the hypervigilance the way I still checked bank statements obsessively and kept meticulous records of every interaction. Trauma's gifts that never stop giving. Recovery isn't a destination, I told the audience. It's a daily choice to not let what they did define who we become. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd helped over 1,000 people escape financial abuse, provided emergency housing, connected survivors with pro bono legal services, and created a network of support that crossed state lines. Every success story healed something in me, proof that breaking the cycle was possible. Jake brought the kids to visit monthly. Tyler, now 10, was in therapy processing the lies he'd been told. Emma, 8, had written me a letter apologizing for the things her mother made her say. Little Sophie, 5, just knew Aunt Tracy was someone who made sure they had what they needed for school. Why did Mommy lie about you? Tyler asked during one visit. Because someone taught her that lying was how families worked, I answered honestly. But we're learning better ways, aren't we? He nodded solemnly. These children would grow up knowing boundaries were healthy, that love didn't require sacrifice of self, that family should support your growth, not demand payment for it. The cycle was breaking with them. Megan had been released early for good behavior and completing intensive therapy. She lived in a halfway house, working at a grocery store and attending community college. We exchanged letters monthly, carefully building something new from the scorched earth of our past. I'm learning who I am without them, she wrote. Without their voices telling me I'm worthless without you to blame. It's terrifying and freeing. Is this how you always felt? Like you could become anything? Not always, I wanted to tell her. only after I escaped their gravitational pull that bent everything toward their needs. But she was learning that now, at 38, finally free to discover who Megan could be without the role they'd assigned her. My parents remained in federal prison unrepentant. They'd filed appeals, each document filled with vitriol about ungrateful daughters and family betrayal. I'd stopped reading them after the first few. Their words had lost power over me, becoming just the extinction burst of narcissists facing consequences. Other relatives reached out occasionally, some with genuine apologies, others testing if I'd softened enough to exploit again. The beautiful thing about documented attempted murder conspiracies, they make boundaries very clear. No contact meant no contact enforced by restraining orders with real teeth. People ask if I forgive them. I continued my speech. Forgiveness isn't absolution. It's releasing the poison they left in your veins. I forgive them for my freedom, not theirs. They created their own consequences. I just stopped shielding them from gravity. The hardest part of recovery was grieving the family I'd never had. The parents who should have celebrated my success instead of plotting to steal it. The sister who should have been my best friend instead of my worst enemy. The extended family who should have been support instead of conspirators. Dr. Williams helped me process the complicated grief. You're mourning illusions as much as relationships. The hardest death to grieve is someone who never existed. She was right. I'd spent 34 years believing that somewhere beneath the dysfunction was real love, that if I just achieved enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, I'd finally be worthy of their genuine affection. The revelation that their love was always conditional, always transactional, required grieving the family I'd imagined alongside the family I'd lost. But from that grief grew something beautiful. Chosen family who loved me without price tags. Emma, who'd risked her safety to help me. Carl, who'd stood by me when it would have been easier to let me go. Patricia, who showed me survival was possible. Mrs. Chen, who'd seen my truth when everyone else believed lies. Marcus, who loved me not despite my scars, but including them. Family isn't blood, I told the audience. Family is who shows up when you're drowning, not who holds your head underwater while claiming it's for your own good. The foundation work gave me purpose beyond personal success. Every escape plan we funded, every survivor we housed, every child we helped protect from generational trauma was a victory against the system that had created me as prey. We'd recently launched a program educating therapists about financial abuse dynamics in families. Too many survivors had been told to work it out, with family members actively destroying them. We created certification programs ensuring mental health professionals understood that family reconciliation wasn't always the goal. Sometimes the healthiest outcome was complete separation. The reconciliation pushers never faced what we faced, one survivor shared during group therapy. They don't understand that some people will literally kill you for your resources while calling it love. Statistics showed our graduates thrived after escaping. Careers flourished without sabotage. Mental health improved without constant gaslighting. Children grew up learning healthy dynamics instead of perpetuating cycles. We were proving what I'd always suspected: the selfish ones who escaped were actually the ones brave enough to break generational curses. My story became part of law school curricula, a case study in family financial abuse escalating to attempted murder. The handbook my family used became evidence in dozens of similar cases nationwide. Martha's network crumbled as survivors found courage to speak up, and prosecutors learned what to look for. Your family's playbook saved my life, a young man told me at the conference. My family had the same handbook, different names. Seeing yours exposed helped me recognize what was happening before they completely destroyed me. This was the unexpected gift of their cruelty. By documenting their methods so meticulously, they'd created a roadmap for others to recognize abuse. Their handbook for destruction became our manual for recognition and escape. As I concluded my speech, I looked at the faces watching me. some still bruised from recent battles, others years into healing but carrying invisible scars. All of us bound by the strange grief of surviving families who'd tried to devour us. They called us selfish for refusing to fund their lives, I said. They called us heartless for maintaining boundaries. They called us family failures for choosing ourselves over their demands. But here's what I learned. The most loving thing you can do for a toxic system is refuse to enable it. Breaking the cycle isn't selfish. It's the ultimate act of love for future generations who deserve better than inheriting trauma disguised as tradition. The standing ovation felt like collective exhale. We'd all been holding our breath, waiting for permission to prioritize our lives over family demands. Here, among fellow survivors, that permission was understood. After the speech, a young woman approached. 23, recently escaped from a similar situation. Do you ever regret fighting back? Sometimes I think it would have been easier to just give them what they wanted. I considered her question, remembering my own moments of near surrender. Easier. Maybe, but not better. They would have taken everything and still called me selfish for not having more to give. At least this way, I kept myself along with my success. She nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. Another survivor beginning the journey of reclaiming her life from family who saw her only as resources to harvest. As the conference ended, I felt the weight of responsibility and privilege. Not everyone survived these battles. Some succumbed to the pressure, gave in to demands, or worse, believed the gaslighting that they were the problem. I carried their stories, too, unnamed victims of family systems that consumed their brightest lights. My phone buzzed with a message from Megan. Watched your speech online. Proud of you. Both of us deserved better than what they gave us. Maybe that's enough common ground to build something real. No rush. Just hope. Hope. Such a dangerous thing for survivors. Yet here we were, hundreds of us hoping that broken cycles meant future generations wouldn't need conferences like this. That somewhere children were growing up learning that love didn't require self-destruction, that success wasn't shameful, that boundaries weren't betrayal. The setting sun painted the conference room golden as attendees exchanged numbers, shared resources, built networks of support. This was our real family reunion, strangers bound by shared understanding that sometimes the most toxic people share your DNA. I thought about that Thanksgiving 3 years ago when my father slammed his fist, declaring they'd voted on my financial servitude. He'd been wrong about everything except one thing: families do help each other. He just never understood that real help empowers rather than enslaves, celebrates rather than punishes, loves without price tags attached. My family had voted me out for refusing exploitation. In response, I'd built a new family of hundreds who understood that love and abuse were mutually exclusive no matter what DNA insisted otherwise. They'd tried to break me for choosing myself. Instead, they'd forged me into someone who helps others make the same choice. The irony was delicious, even if the meal that delivered it had been poisoned. Walking out of that hotel into the evening air, I felt the truth settle into my bones. I was Tracy Morrison, survivor and thriver, builder of new families and breaker of old cycles. They'd given me a story I never wanted, but I'd written an ending they never expected. And that was the greatest revenge of all, living well, despite their best efforts to ensure I couldn't. The family that voted to own me had instead set me free. Their cruelty had become my compass, always pointing toward who I refused to become. I'd learned many things through this journey, but the most important was this: when family becomes a crime syndicate, survival isn't selfishness. It's the first step toward building something better. And sometimes, the family you choose is worth more than the family you're given, especially when the given family sees you as nothing more than a resource to be extracted. The cycle was broken. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in my life, I was genuinely free to discover who Tracy Morrison could be, without the weight of other people's expectations disguised as love. That was worth every lost relationship, every burned bridge, every moment of grief for the family that never really existed. Because in the end, I hadn't just survived them, I'd transcended them. And in doing so, I'd shown others that transcendence was possible. The greatest tragedy of toxic families is how they convince you that suffering is love. The greatest triumph is learning better and teaching others the difference. As I drove toward home, toward Marcus and our chosen family, toward work that mattered and a life I'd built on my own terms, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They'd lost more than I had. They'd lost someone who would have loved them forever if they'd just let me. Instead, they'd created their own destroyer and their own destruction. The vote they'd taken to control my life had ultimately freed me from theirs. And that freedom, that was priceless, worth every penny they'd tried to steal and every tear I'd shed, realizing they valued my money more than my humanity. Because in the end, I'd kept my humanity. They'd sold theirs for the hope of $3,000 a month. The real question wasn't whether I'd won. It was whether they'd ever understand what they'd lost. And the answer I realized with perfect clarity was that it didn't matter anymore. I was free. The rest was just noise from a past that no longer owned me. And that was the most powerful ending I could write to their story. It was over, and I was still here stronger for their worst efforts to break me. The family that voted to control me had instead voted me into a freedom they'd never understand. And that irony would outlive us all. What started with a slammed fist and cruel demands ended with open hands and boundless possibilities. They'd written the beginning, but I'd claimed the ending. And in that claiming was every survivor's victory. We decide how our stories end, not them. Never them. Not anymore. Not ever again. Before I wrap up this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever faced a situation where family felt more like predators than protectors, where the people who should support your success instead tried to steal it? If my story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and you're not alone in this struggle. If this story helped you recognize toxic patterns in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that choosing yourself over family exploitation isn't selfish, it's necessary. Together, we can break these cycles and build better futures. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, real family celebrates your success instead of trying to confiscate it. You deserve love without price tags attached. Until next time, stay strong and keep choosing yourself.